webinar is now live. I'm going to give a couple seconds for folks to trickle in so they're not missing anything right at the top of the hour. Hello, friends. Thank you, folks, for joining today's episode of The Lunchroom. Going to give it another 30 seconds or so of me talking to myself on screen so that no one misses anything crucial, no crucial information. Hope everyone's week is going well. It's only Tuesday, but, got 3 more work days left and then smooth sailing for a little bit. So really pleased and honored that you all chose to spend a lunch hour on Tuesday with us as part of The Lunchroom. See a couple more people trickling in. Amazing. I'm going to jump off with an introduction of myself so I don't take up too much of this time. I'm Sarah Schofield-Manser. I am A.R.T's Assistant Director of Special Events and Partnerships. I take the she series of pronouns. I am a white woman with shoulder-length, dark brown hair. I've got a little waffle weave, my favorite sweater that I wear a lot, so you might recognize it. But a little waffle weave sweater on to stay warm because it's quite cold outside. I am sitting in an office on a swivelly chair that helps me move around a lot, and I've got headphones in so I can hear you all a little bit better as well. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the land that Oberon and the Lobe occupy is the indigenous territory of the Massachusetts people. And today I am calling in from territory of the Massachusetts and Wabanaki folks. I'm going to drop a tool in the chat for everyone if you'd like to investigate at home the indigenous land that you are dialing in from today. So I encourage you to check that out on your own time, maybe after the webinar. Just a couple housekeeping things. So we've got an hour of content programmed for you all today. It's going to be broken up into about 45 minutes of discussion and 15 minutes of time for audience Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for our host or our guest, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A feature that's at the very bottom of your screen. And please note that that is different from the chat feature. So if you want us to see your question, make sure to use the Q&A box. Amazing. So I have taken up all the time that I should take up this week. So I'd like to invite our guest host, Emma Watt, to join me on screen. Emma, hey. Hey,
Sarah, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
It's always awesome to see you in what I describe as the Beauty and the Beast library set that you are calling in from. It's very beautiful and I'm very jealous.
Well, it is not mine. It belongs to my mother, but I like being in it as well.
I love it. That's great. Well, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and then I'll turn off my camera and let you get on with the show.
Awesome. My name is Emma Watt. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the line producers here at A.R.T, and I was the line producer of Jack and the Beanstalk. I am a white woman with shoulder-length reddish hair. I'm wearing a white lacy shirt, and I'm, as Sarah mentioned, sitting in front of a very large bookshelf. And I am calling in today from Durham, New Hampshire, which is the unceded territory of the Abenaki and Wabanaki people. That's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm at this point going to disappear from your screens and let Emma take the reins, but I will see you all next week for another episode of The Lunchroom. Bye, Emma.
Thanks, Sarah. So today I am so thrilled to be joined by 2 of my very favorite artists and collaborators on Jack and the Beanstalk. First of all, Julia Riew, our book writer, lyricist, and composer extraordinaire, as well as the author of last year's Thumbelina. And Rebecca Aparicio, who is an amazing director, musical theater writer, advocate, producer, and the director of Jack and the Beanstalk. Welcome, friends. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm super excited. I'm kind of nervous. I don't know. I'm so nervous. I'm in a Zoom room. I'm Julia. I am a Asian American woman with long, blackish, brownish hair. I am calling in from the unceded territory of the Mansi Lenape people, and I'm wearing a pink kind of fuzzy sweater. Was there anything that I missed? I think that was. Yeah, and I'm calling in front of a white wall.
Awesome. Rebecca, how about you?
Hi, my name is Rebecca Aparicio. I am calling from Birmingham, Alabama, which is the unceded land of the Creek and Shawnee people. I am currently in front of a cloud background. It's blue night sky, which is from Storyland, Jack and the Beanstalk. I have dark brown hair, dark brown, blackish, like Julia said. I'm Cuban American. I have brown eyes, and I am wearing a black dress and with gold hoops and a gold necklace. And I'm also wearing headphones.
Ooh, accessory.
Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see you guys back in a Zoom room in the week since we've finished the show. So just to start off, I should just say that the family show that we do every holiday season is one of my very favorite projects at the A.R.T. I feel like it's really special. And I was wondering if you could both speak a little bit to what draws you to theater for young audiences or theater for children. What is exciting about making musicals for this particular audience? And yeah, why is it interesting? Why is it fun? Julia, do you want to start? Because I know this is kind of a big passion of yours, and definitely one of your lifelong career dreams.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been doing theater in some form or fashion for a very, very long time. Kind of since I was a kid. But I think beyond that, for me, family is just really, really important. I'm really, really close with everyone in my family, and I feel like I first experienced stories through my family, especially my older brothers. I have two older brothers, and when we were little, we're all very close in age. So when we were little, my oldest brother, Brad, would tell us these stories. And then my other brother, Grant, and I would like hop around on the beds and like act out the stories, which is kind of like very early on. That was when I was very, very little, as long as I can remember, basically. So that's kind of how I started getting into stories, which I guess in a form was kind of like theater. And so because of that, I think that's really where my interest in writing family musicals came from, just because I first experienced stories through family. I first started doing little sort of kinds of theater when I was a little kid. And for me, when you're a little kid, it's like the world is so infinite and it's big, like the world just feels bigger because you're smaller, which is getting into some Thumbelina themes in there. But also just your imagination, I feel like is so powerful when you're a little kid. And for me, I think being able to cultivate that imagination by experiencing theater and experiencing stories as a little kid was really, really important, I think, to who I am today. And even like the values I sort of hold true to my heart, I think came from a lot of the stories that I saw or heard or listened to when I was a little kid. And so that's why I was just really passionate about writing for families and writing for young children, just to help kind of teach kids about, you know, what's possible in the world and all the different things that you can dream, I think. So yeah, that's sort of where it came from for me.
Yeah. Oh, I know it's just one small part of your practice, but also an important one.
Yeah. No, it's kind of been like a very collateral part of my practice. Since I graduated, I mean, very much like Julia in terms of path, like we had a long conversation about both making our siblings act out stories. So very much family was always a big part of, and they're kind of the way that I got introduced into theater because my parents were into attending as audience members. But as soon as I graduated college, my very first job was as a performer for Birmingham Children's Theater. And I did a tour, and that kind of changed my entire perspective on family musicals. I had attended as a child, but seeing the areas that we reached that were areas that would not have theater otherwise. And then also just that what Julia described, which is the magic and the imagination and having kids respond to a story in such a visceral way, because an audience of children, they have no filter. They tell you exactly what they're thinking when they're thinking it, which is, I think, the best thing ever. They're just so honest. And so I pursued that in New York, and I've kind of had like a little side gig performing children's theater for the last 9 years. And so I do that as like another thing that I do because I feel it keeps me really grounded in why I love theater and why it's important to tell stories. And yeah, so now I also have a little side company where we're writing children's musicals because we feel it's like important to change the representation that's out there as well in terms of like what is a children's story, which is what I really respond to about a lot of Julia's work too.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a magical age group to work with, for sure. Thinking about that, what was it like in this time to be making a children's musical, and what? Talk to me about what that was like, because obviously it's not like what you've been doing for the rest of your lives to create this show. So, what elements of what you know about making a children's musical did you bring with you, and like what were some new surprises and challenges to start with?
Totally. Yeah. So when I first started writing this show, it was actually pre-pandemic. It was, or I guess just the beginning of it. So the United States was a little behind. So it was around January. Was it? What was I writing it during the fall? Now I'm like, my years are all getting mixed up. We've been quarantined for so long. But yeah, so I was working on the show almost, I guess, I started almost a year ago. So I was drawing a lot from Thumbelina in terms of what I learned about, especially the audience participation parts of the show, I think, which I'll get into in a second. But what I loved about Thumbelina, kind of what Rebecca was saying before, was the way that kids got to stand up and shout or like clap their hands or like make noises during the show. I love that. I was like, those were my favorite parts of the show. And so when I was writing this first draft of Jack, I was incorporating a bunch of different audience participation moments. I was like, oh, we could have them like imagine the Beanstalk, or we could have them like make noise during the Storyland concert. And so I incorporated that a lot more, I think, into the story. And then I think that ended up sort of being one of the challenges, because once we realized, oh, it's actually going to be virtual, it's going to be online, sort of reimagining those moments, I think, was one of the tricky parts. But also there were a lot of really exciting and really fun parts of writing a show during a pandemic. First of all, like the animation was so incredible, and you can kind of see the back. Rebecca's background right now is a little showcase of some of the backgrounds and animations, but the concept of a set design was totally different with this, and I think that's really exciting. Because for me, one of my dream is to like write music or write an animated children's show, or like write something for Disney, and so getting to work, I think, with animators was really, really exciting. Yeah, I think one really important thing for me was writing a very uplifting show. Just something that was happy and something that was really funny. I think I wanted to incorporate maybe a lot of humor, I think, in this show compared to Thumbelina. I think Thumbelina did have a lot of humor as well. But I think definitely just like bringing joy was something that was one of my big goals in this year, especially. So yeah, that's kind of it for me. I don't know, Rebecca.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what's really special is, I mean, obviously the challenges of not having kids to respond to, and having to remind yourself that like at the end of the day, the thing that we're all working on is to create something that makes little ones at home really happy. And so just like reminding ourselves that like we're in like theater mode and we're making this really hard thing, but reminding ourselves that the reason that we're doing it is giving families an opportunity to come together and watch a show as a family, which is really exciting. And I think the joy, to me, it's always about the joy that you get to have when you're working in this medium of like family musicals. And I think that it was really special to have like a moment to create something really imaginative and creative with a really great message that Julia wrote. And it just was really special. And I kept saying throughout the process, you know, we were making this in the middle of the elections and in the middle of the waiting for the election results. And it was such a important moment that I think if I didn't have this, I might have been like, but I was like that anyway, but coming back to this and the joy of being able to use our imaginations and really dream was like so special.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rebecca, I feel like once you joined the project, we really started to shape kind of what the piece was going to look like and what the language of it was going to be. Because I think, and very initially, you know, we talked on the A.R.T side about, okay, this should be virtual because we still want to like have this joyful family moment. Julia's written this beautiful piece. We have so many talented undergraduates to perform in it. But like what was that process like of going from like, we think this might be on Zoom to the sort of movie type thing that we ended up making somehow? How did that happen?
I tricked you.
We talked about radio musical at one point too.
Yeah, we had gone through radio play.
Oh wow. I think that I just kind of started. I was thinking about that this morning as I was preparing for today, and it started like, oh, we're going to do a Zoom musical and we're going to be in boxes. And I had done a Zoom musical over the summer out of necessity. We were going to be outside, and then all of a sudden we had to shift to Zoom in 2 weeks. And watching shows as an audience member that were on Zoom, I just really felt like even I, as an adult, would sometimes kind of zone out because the medium is just, we're in a box and we're not really engaging in physical space. And like, of course, as a director, I'm very interested in physical space. And so I just really wanted to see how far we can kind of push the edges of that in Zoom. And so it started from there. And then we thought, well, the musical numbers have to be pre-recorded because we know Zoom doesn't work for music, for live music. So we have to pre-record those. We might as well pre-record the scenes because then that way our quality is even overall, because there is a difference between filming and then Zoom quality. And then I was like, well, we have to edit that together. And since we're doing that, we can really go a little crazy with our like backgrounds, and now we can get physical space and I can see people's bodies, which I really wanted to like see the fullness of a human on the screen. And then the amazing producer that Emma is and Jay, our production manager, are like, we're gonna bring this person in, Jonathan Carr, who's an editor and does stuff for A.R.T, and see, if you guys vibe. And Jonathan was amazing and took my idea and then was like, what about if we pushed it a little bit more? And so then that kind of grew and grew until what we did. And I think that was really special about this process, is that I had a tiny idea, a little seed, if you will, for a little pun humor, a little seed. And then like Emma and Jay would make it happen. And then everybody else on the team just kind of followed until all of a sudden we finished and we were like, whoa, we just made a movie. I think that was on my side of things, how it went.
Yeah, I think that really was kind of the experience. Just like every new person that we talked to about it kind of added a little more and a little more. And like the props department came in with some great ideas and costumes came in with some great ideas. And it sort of snowballed a little bit.
It definitely snowballed, but we were so lucky that everybody wanted to take it to the max. And I think that was what was so special about this process, at least for me.
Yeah, for sure. That's like why I love theater, honestly, because it's so collaborative. Like everyone just comes in with these ideas, even when it's not on Zoom. I think that's like the most exciting part for me as a writer, is like handing it off and then seeing what the director comes up, seeing what the designers come up with, seeing what the actors bring to the lines and to the music. Like that is the best part for me. I think that's the most exciting part. So definitely, really, lots of fun.
Well, maybe this is a good moment for me to show just a little bit of the beginning of the show to audience members who may not have seen it, to have like a little visual to go along with what we're describing. Hang on one second. Hey, Sarah, could you give me a screen sharing ability?
I sure can. Hold on one second.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no worries. Maybe it would be helpful before people see this. Rebecca, could you just describe what the filming process was actually like a little bit?
Yeah.
Like, what did it look like when we were doing it? We were sitting there during election week, waiting for the states to be called. Yeah, what was that?
So it was very interesting. We had to rehearse kind of quickly because there's two parts of the process, which was we were also building an album at the exact same time, which we needed for filming. So they were both serving the same purpose, but we spent the first 2 weeks kind of like focused on like, let's learn the music really fast and lay those tracks down. And then we were rehearsing simultaneously. So then we had about 2 weeks to kind of just try to piece it together. 4 weeks overall before we started shooting. And then we sent actors green screens all over the US, and everybody had also like a whole setup with like lights and a ring light with a little stand, which came, thank God, from our lighting designer Finn. So then they had a stand to put their phone on. And what we did was we had their cell phone. I'm like trying to grab my phone. So we had their cell phone on like a stand right here, and it was the screen. So if you can imagine seeing, of course, my phone is dead. So you could see the little people here on the Zoom screen, and that's kind of how I would direct them. And then we would just hope for the best because we thought we could see them, but then we got some of the footage back, and it was like, oh, we actually couldn't really see them because they were a tiny square within a square. But it worked out. So it was all good. But it was really funny to see actors like in their bedrooms with an entire setup behind them. And it was always magical because a prop would magically pop up or a costume would arrive. And then we would see them having a costume fitting in their bedroom. It's really fun.
Yes. And for those of you who may not be familiar with our family shows, they are performed by our Harvard undergraduates. It's a partnership between the A.R.T. and the college. And so, of course, most of them were not on campus. So we actually had performers in 7 different states, all zooming in and filming themselves, as Rebecca mentioned, in mostly their childhood bedrooms. Let me share just a little clip just to give you all a taste of we went from green screen in your bedroom to this. Hang on 1 second.
Once upon a time, in a magical land just above the clouds and just below the moon, there lived a storyteller. And this bard, known to all as the Grand Storyteller, had a fantastic power. The power to make any story come to life. Oh, there's a place up in the sky, above the clouds, it's floating high, below the moon, where dreamers roam. And in this land where magic rules, quick wits will always conquer fools, and every fairy tale creature calls it home. Welcome to Storyland, friendly creatures. I am the Grand Storyteller, and I'll be your guide today. And now, introducing our Storylanders. Our storyteller tells us tales where evil fails and good prevails, and every heroine can overcome her strife. And if you make the journey, you can change your destiny, and fairy tales can come to life. So why don't you come and visit? Don't blink or you just might miss it. Listen to our lessons. Here there's one for everyone. It's time that we begun. So let's begin. One day, after...
And I will stop us right there. But that's just a little taste of what the show looks and sounds and feels like. Yeah, absolutely. So, Julia and Rebecca, we talked a little bit about we had a kind of fun conversation about some of the influences on the show and some of the like aesthetic inspirations. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. Julia, do you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. So I have 2 favorite composers that I talk about every single time people ask me this question. But so my favorite composers are Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz. And I definitely draw inspiration from them with everything that I do. I just love how their work is really singable and accessible and so lovable. And I grew up watching Disney and listening to the Wicked soundtrack, and then in high school we did Pippin, and so I think I drew a lot of inspiration from those two artists for sure. And you might even catch some Pippin storyline type things in Jack and the Beanstalk, and a little bit of Tangled in the plot of Thumbelina. Maybe a little more than a little in that one, but so those were definitely my musical inspirations for the show. But you'll also find a lot of like pop rock sort of things in Jack and the Beanstalk, a little bit more, which is honestly, I don't really know exactly where the inspiration for those ones came from. There were some really specific ones, like the Fairly Odd Parents theme song. I drew inspiration from that for King Giant's Going Large. When I sent it to my when I was sending it to my orchestrator, to Ian, my collaborator, I literally sent him the Fairly Odd Parents theme song, and then I sent him King Giant's Going Large, and I was like, "Can you make it sound like this? Like, can you make it sound like the Fairly Odd Parents theme song?" So those are some of the musical inspirations. And then I think for me, for the plot, in terms of the inspiration of that, I honestly think my mom is really someone who I draw inspiration for the theme, all the stories. So for Thumbelina, a big thing was like reading, the importance of reading. And that was something my mom always told me when I was growing up. And so then for Jack and the Beanstalk, there's these 4 pillars. There's like kindness, courage, determination, and creativity. And those are, especially kindness, I think is something my mom's always said, like, make sure to be kind and be compassionate, especially when I was a little kid, and even now still. And so I think those are definitely themes that I really took to heart and wanted to put in the show and kind of share with the audience.
Aesthetic? Did you say aesthetic?
Yeah, I think aesthetic.
So I think I kind of grew from Julia's story, and I just kind of started imagining. I think to me, it kind of grew around. Oh my gosh, I just did another pun without trying. Grew around the beanstalk. Grew around the beanstalk, because that was the one moment that I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this via Zoom. And I had thought of some really elaborate ways, which I can share with people later, about, beanstalk puppets, etc. And then I thought it would be really cool if it was an animation. And I had just seen this team do an animation for another theater I was working with. And so I was like, oh, perfect. Maybe they might be interested in coming on. And so then that kind of grew from there. I just really wanted the world to feel really magical. And, it's just, the idea of Storyland really grounded me in this idea of a storybook. So like, I kind of wanted to start with the book opening, and then at some moment the book closing. And so I watched a lot of Disney movies, with the old school Disney movies that had the book that opened. Sleeping Beauty in particular was yes. The jumping off point that I made everyone watch a lot of times. With the idea of like the story like coming to life, because that's exactly what Julia writes in those lyrics. And so that kind of gave us a lot of opportunity that we had, because we could just jump from magical place to magical place. And that kind of built itself based on the text, and being able to use the green screens. I mean, I had a crazy idea that was like not achievable. That was, we can like put different drops back there, and we were going to print them out. That was early on. And then we moved on to the green screens, because it gave us a little more flexibility in terms of what we could build, how many worlds we could build. And that really just took a life of its own again. Like, it just went a little idea, and then it made a bunch of little ideas, which was really exciting.
And Rebecca, I know that you and I talked a lot in the early days about trying to, like, that feeling that you get from having something that is animated with something that is live, and like playing with this kind of handmade idea. And I know that you watched a lot of children's YouTube to sort of understand and think about that. Are there any reflections or thoughts you have about kind of what is this thing that is in between theater and a movie almost?
Yeah, I watched a lot of Blue's Clues, kind of the jumping off point. I kept saying Blue's Clues because there's a direct address, and then also it's a human interacting with cartoons. All the same way as Roger Rabbit. I'm a kid of the 90s, so the Roger Rabbit movies. Dick Tracy did a little bit. And then Reading Rainbow. I watched a lot of Reading Rainbow, like taking it back because I think like the 80s and 90s did a lot of like weird human and cartoon stuff, probably more than we did now because it was like the hand drawn versus the CGI, which I was really drawn to that hand drawn aesthetic, and it really feeling like the illustration versus a computer thing. Yes, Space Jam, Sophie. I just saw the come up. Space Jam. I did watch some scenes from Space Jam as well. And so that's kind of what brought it up. And then I wanted to be current too. So then luckily my sister has two amazing kids. And so I watched what they watched. I've watched some Blippi. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Blippi. It's a very strange, trippy YouTube show. It's very, very weird, but it also helped me think outside of the box because Blippi was very non-linear. He's just jumping. There's a lot of jump cuts in things now. To keep attention span because, that's a whole other diatribe. I won't go into that right now. But I watched a lot of Blippi as well. And there's one other kid show. What was it? And Ryan's Toy World. Have y'all seen this? It's a little kid that became famous by opening toys up. Like the whole YouTube star thing for children's content is very crazy. You guys should go on a deep dive on that. But Ryan's World, he also like opens toys, and then there's a lot of other things that happen within the show, and that also helps me kind of think, outside the box.
Blippi.
I never seen
Blippi. It's very millions and millions of viewers, y'all. He has a toy line now. Check out Blippi after this. It's very strange. No harm to like Blippi fans out there. He's very popular.
Sponsored by Blippi.
And we were very lucky that you have nieces who could kind of watch some little drafts and see some sneak peeks for us and kind of help us, understand a little bit what was getting across.
Yeah, they were our beta testers.
Yeah. We need that. So slight shift. But I think one of the things I've been wondering about a lot and that we're, talking about internally as well is kind of like, as we move back into a world where in-person theater is possible again, which we hope we will very soon. What are some lessons or reflections or things you're chewing on from working on a project like this, from this time of trying to pivot and do things virtually and gain new skills, that you think you might carry forward, into your work? Or kind of like where does this grow next for you as artists?
For me, I think one of the really, really exciting things about this process was that we got to record an album. And so I did a ton of work with Ian and a ton of work with Alex on working on the both amazing artists, amazing people. I think I saw Ian in the participants. I told him I would say hi. So hi, Ian. and I think something so exciting about that was just diving into the musical side. This show has 12 songs, which is I think 3 or 4 more than Thumbelina had. So just focusing on the music to text ratio was something that was really important for this show, because Zoom or watching something on a screen is very different than watching something live. So you really need those musical aspects to keep the audience engaged. And so this show ended up being a lot more music than text, I think, which I realized I think is something I want to carry forward to with every show I do. Just having these musical numbers back to back really helps the pacing of the show. Just because of the constraint of Zoom, we just needed to keep it moving forward. We had to cut a bunch of dialogue in order to fit it into, we cut the show down a bunch. It was, the first read through was an hour long, and then I cut like a third of the text, and then it was somehow an hour long again by the end of the process. But what I found was just that process of cutting all the extraneous dialogue, things that weren't helping the pacing or weren't moving the story forward, was actually really, really helpful, I think. And the final script that we ended up with, I think would be the one that if we were to take it to a stage production, to use that one rather than the previous one, just because the the pacing of it had to be fast. And because of that, I think I learned those are the shows that I prefer. I think the faster pacing ones. So those are definitely the skills that I would take.
Yeah. That's a long process to do the cutting. We did do a lot of readings in the summer. And just like really, you were really ruthless.
Yeah. I mean, in the original conception of the show, Buttercup, the cow, was supposed to be like a huge character. Like she was going to be like the sidekick the whole show. She was going to be the cow that jumped over the moon. So that was like the fiddler cat. She's hanging out with the fiddler cat. So that was one of the first things to go. And then just like a bunch of jokes that weren't quite hitting. The Just Jack joke that was gone.
Yeah.
I think like so many things that we're going to take away from this time. I think, first of all, I think gratitude when we're able to be together again. I think there's going to be like just a new appreciation for being able to gather in the room together, something that we just took for granted. And then I think what's been really great about having to work in this medium is accessibility and how it's not centered around physical location. I was able to have my family watch the show in Alabama, and then friends, all over the US that could also tune in. And so I think that that's something I'm interested in investigating, how we take that into the next era of theater. And then, I always kind of work this way. I work in a non-hierarchical way as a director. I mean, obviously, of course, you have to steer the ship, but I definitely rely on my team as a whole as collaborators. So we're all working together. But that was really clear in this medium because everybody, all the actors also had to be their own crew. And without their hard work and dedication, we couldn't do anything at all. And I mean, that's the same for the entire production team. Everybody had to think very outside the box and do a lot of problem solving. And I think that willingness to problem solve is something that is going to hopefully carry on as we embark on the next phase. And then I'm really curious about working in, this hybrid film theater world, and the possibilities that lie within that as well.
Yeah, major kudos to the actors. I think Odessa took her like an hour to put on every time. The cow, because it was a whole thing. The cow.
Odessa plays the cow, and you didn't see the cow in the clip that we shared, but she has like a full run with extra legs. And thank you, Elizabeth. It was beautiful.
So good. It was such a good costume.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey made the legs that was my dream come true. I wanted little legs that did this, and we had them.
Yeah. I also think about that moment when we were first trying on the spider costume on James, which you saw. And because of the distance we could get from the camera, the legs kind of, the way that they were initially positioned, they didn't really show up. So James had to completely re-engineer how they were hanging with us over Zoom with his roommate laughing in the background.
Yeah, he had to cut a shirt too, remember, because something was showing. So Elizabeth walked him through cutting a shirt and pinning some things. And then we discovered that maybe he could pin the legs to the elbow, and then I could see the legs. I just really wanted to see those legs. It was my other dream come true. And James had it, and he only had 2 safety pins, so we had to be very strategic with where they went. Problem solving.
Yeah,
problem solving.
Yeah, and that was, I feel really a good encapsulation of kind of what the whole process was like in some ways. That kind of level of everybody having to be on board and go outside of their traditional role a little bit to make things happen. What you're saying about accessibility also really resonates with me, Rebecca. I know one of the things we initially talked about in kind of conceiving how we were going to produce this was just that trying to make something that was on demand, that was available to families whenever, that people don't have that barrier of needing to get to the theater in Cambridge at a specific time, knowing that kids are not always, the easiest to schedule or wrangle, and especially during the pandemic. Yeah. Well, I think it might be time. We have a lot of questions in the Q&A. So let me take a look and see what we've got. So first, a question from our friend Emily, who's asking, what is the most challenging part of creating and directing for Zoom? And what was the most rewarding part? Which we talked about a little bit, but if there's anything else you want to add, I think, Rebecca, especially for you.
Yeah, I can start. I think the hardest part is working together with folks that you maybe haven't ever met in person. It's actually been really easy in so many ways because as theater people, there's just like this willingness to experiment and to dive in and work really hard, which I think is so special. But I think you miss those little moments of you're walking out of the theater and you get to have a little tiny chat and you get to know a little bit more about the person that you're collaborating with. I think that for me was one of the most challenging parts. So I tried to make space for that in the rehearsal room. And then also whenever we'd have some meetings, it's just really important for me to get to know folks on a personal level if we're doing this really hard work. And then I think I didn't know the language. I think that was the one thing that we kept saying over and over again in the room was that even though I had done some Zoom stuff since the pandemic started, this was a whole brand new world. We're collaborating on a new musical. So making changes was not as easy as it would be in the room. So it would be, I'd send Julia and Ian, I have this idea for underscoring, and they would go off and make it in 2 seconds because they're both geniuses. But then we would try and then say, oh no, it needs a little bit more room here. And it's that kind of discovery. I really pushed us to have that ability to discover anyway. But that part was kind of, it's a challenge because you're kind of stuck within these parameters. Or I want to see, again, with the body stuff, I want to see the rest. I want to see the feet of our, protagonists. And there's just not enough physical space. So things like that were just really, you're very confined, but that forces you to just use another part of your brain, which then in turn becomes a good thing. And the reward is obviously the final product. I think that's always the reward, and seeing little ones respond to it is the biggest reward.
Yeah, for me, I think I definitely agree. I think the trickiest part, especially music rehearsals, was teaching harmonies and stuff. When you can't actually sing them together, I think that was tricky. And then also just maybe Zoom fatigue. Just hours of Zoom rehearsal are not quite the same as hours of in-person rehearsal. But then I think on the other side of that, it was so rewarding when Alex mixed all the vocals together, hear all of the harmonies for the first time. It was crazy. We had never heard all of the different parts together. So it was really exciting then when we got to hear the final album and just hear all the voices together as if they're in the same room. That was really, really fun.
Yeah, it really is the kind of process where every level of planning has to kind of be right. And then you don't see how it's working until the very end. Definitely thinking about Rebecca's storyboards, and Julia, you and Ian did such a great job teaching those vocal parts, or they wouldn't have come together in that way. But yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking compared to the theater, I think.
Yes, that was a big point, and I forgot. So thank you for saying that. It was the not knowing, being a week out and having no idea what it was going to look like, and thinking oh no, I made us all work really hard, and I don't know, because you can't see it. Yes,
you can't go back and change it once it's there because it's set.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, you have to have a lot of trust for sure. So a couple folks have had this question or a version of it, but maybe starting with Julia, just what are some other fairy tales that either you would love to adapt and write about, or some children's stories that you feel are especially resonant for our current moment? And yeah, what would you like to see or like to work on yourself?
Definitely. So I'm actually working on something right now, adapting a fairy tale, but it's a Korean fairy tale. It's called The Blind Man's Daughter. And it's in Korean, it's Nengi Namjae Dal. And it is about, a girl who, I'm not going to say too much about it because the fairy tale is what I'm adapting is quite different, but it's about this girl who basically risks her life for her father and will do anything for her father. And so you can check it out on Google if you can find it. There's a bunch of translations online. But I also, one of the fairy tales I was thinking about adapting for for the A.R.T family show actually for this year that I ended up going with Jack, but I was thinking about doing Robin Hood, or some adaptation of Robin Hood, something like The Return of Robin Hood, or something Robin Hood related. And then in terms of children's or fairy tales or things that I would recommend, number one would be Avatar: The Last Airbender. Best TV, my favorite TV show in all of existence. I've seen every single episode at least 4 times and like maybe even 5 times. And the themes are just, it's funny. It is exciting. It's like the themes are just so heartwarming, but they're also like really important, like heavy themes for a children's show. It's like, I draw so much inspiration from Avatar: The Last Airbender, just in terms of like everything that I do in life. So I love that show. I would highly recommend it. No matter what age you are, if you're an adult, if you are 5 years old, this show is for everyone. And then, I think, yeah, that was my go-to. I love that show. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. Avatar.
That's great. I did watch Avatar during the quarantine time, and I also discovered that there are some people who have been making an Avatar musical.
Yeah.
There's a deep rabbit hole you can go down there if you've already seen the show.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
Rebecca, are there any fairy tales you'd especially love to direct, or stories you'd especially love to work on?
Yeah, I think just like stories that just, I love a fairy tale, but I'd just like to see fairy tales that encompass like more stories that aren't just like Eurocentric. Like Coco is like one of the most beautiful things that I think I've ever seen. And just like what Julia was talking about, adapting a Korean fairy tale. And then I think also creating content for kids that also deals with things that they might be dealing with. Like I was writing a musical about the environment because I think it's really important that, I know as a young kid at like first grade, I read about the rainforest being chopped down by McDonald's, for burgers. And so then I just never ate a McDonald's burger ever again from like first grade. So I think that we can impact young people's minds. And I think that, so writing about the environment, so I have a little musical called Nora Saves the World, about a raccoon who wants to save the world, because she loves trash and we need to take care of trash and recycling. And then like cultural stories that embody, like I said, like there's a lot of displacement that is happening right now. And so that's always something I'm going to want to talk about and give kids an opportunity to process and see themselves seen in some way. And that goes to all aspects, more representation in terms of gender diversity and physical ability and all of that.
Definitely. I second that.
That maybe takes us nicely to one of these other questions, which is just about the casting process and I would say like both what that was like over Zoom, but also, what do you bring to a casting process? Anyway, like what is that like for you? What are your values in that process? How do you think it should be?
Do you want to start, Julia? Because you started a little bit before me with the casting process.
Sure. Definitely. Casting is one of my favorite parts of the show. It's like the first time you get to hear the words out loud by someone else who's an actor. So that was really, really exciting. Even online, it was super exciting. So basically since we're casting through Harvard, it was mostly up to me to pub throughout the Harvard channels. And so I drafted up, with Emma and with Ian, a little blurb of the show, a little information about what we were looking for. I think we asked for like a verse and a chorus, and I put together a couple just very, very short, not even monologues, like just a couple sentences for people to read and submit videos. And so I sent that out basically across all the different Harvard channels. And then we put it in the form of a Google form. So people just could submit videos straight into there, submit a Google folder with a song and some scenes that they were reading. And so from there, we got, we got a lot of auditions. It was really, really exciting. And our whole team, me and Abby and Joy, the stage manager and assistant director and orchestrator, we were all sitting and we were just refreshing the page over and over again, just looking at all the auditions coming in. We were so excited. And then from there, we did a round of callbacks where we sent them now a song to learn from the show. So that was really exciting because now we get to hear songs in other people's voices. And so then they sent back another series of tapes. And then then from there, we had a final audition round, which was done over Zoom, actually. And so the whole team, me, Emma, Rebecca, Joy, Abby, and Ian all sat down in a Zoom for like several hours on a Saturday and a Sunday and a Friday, I think. And we basically just had people come in on Zoom, read the scene on Zoom with a scene partner who was in a different location on their Zoom, and then sing the song again. So yeah, I think it was a really fun and exciting process. It wasn't too different over Zoom, other than that we got another round of auditions, which was fun, great. Yeah.
Yeah, so I joined the process when we were doing final callbacks. And I think because I started out as an actor many years ago, I think it's really important to create like a really welcoming space for actors. I think that, especially when you're doing like a longer call, this is like a smaller pool of actors, but I think it's important to really honor the fact that they're giving up their time for the possibility of like not even making it to the show. And so I always try to give them the time and respect in the room of like, let's make this a little session. I'm always going to give a little adjustments because that's how I get information about, whether there's somebody that can take adjustments and they're going to be a good person to collaborate with in the room. So I always make space for that, regardless of the time crunch. I always want to make sure that we have space to experiment a little bit so that they at least feel like, oh, I gave my best self. If somebody's having a nervous day, give them an opportunity to leave and come back, just so that they can feel really happy. Like I did the best I could and like it didn't work out, but at least I presented my best self. And then I think for all of us, it was really important that we just really stuck to our principles and our values in terms of diversity, both in gender and ethnic and multicultural backgrounds, and that we made sure we made space for that. And that we were checking ourselves every step of the way. Are we sticking true to what we say we're gonna do and following through on that? Because it's really important to make sure that everyone has opportunities and taking that into account when we're casting.
Yeah. And I think especially as we think about children's theater, like wanting to make sure, we talked a lot about wanting to make sure all kids could see themselves in our cast. For sure. It was exciting to be able to put together a company that I feel like accomplished that, as well as being so amazing in other ways.
Exactly.
Rebecca, this is a question for you. A.R.T. audiences, for those of you who don't know, Rebecca is not new to the A.R.T. with this project. She worked on the directing teams for Endlings and Gloria. Our A.R.T. NYC program also brought a group to see Evita.
Yeah, that's right.
And this question is in looking at all those productions, all of those kind of moments that we've worked together, and thinking of just like the different situations that they brought forward, is there a standout moment for you over those processes where creativity triumphed over a challenge?
Yeah, I think that the thing that I take away most from the A.R.T. is just the fact that y'all are not unwilling to take risks and really making the space for the artist to be their truest, biggest self. I mean, I definitely felt that in this process, embarking on this journey, knowing that I didn't really know what I was doing. Since Zoom, I hadn't really done this specific version. I had all these skill sets from different, experiences, but having the belief that and support to really push myself out of my comfort zone. And I think that I saw that in all of them, obviously with Endlings, with the willingness to put a pool on stage and a lot of challenges with that and seeing everyone problem solve and work together to solve, Emma and I were reminiscing about the heater in the pool for Endlings. And then, with Gloria, there's just a lot of challenges with the seating and how are we creating the right space, and rebuilding the theater to make it into the round. So I think that every challenge, while it was a challenge, it also felt very surmountable, which I think is not the experience in every single place that I walk into. And then in terms of, you said audience, so I do want to think about the A.R.T. audience, and I think that they also have a willingness to go on that journey with you, which is, I think, also really, really special about the A.R.T., that the audience is also there to support you and go on that journey. Did I answer the question?
Yes. I think you did great. So in our final couple minutes, I did want to ask you both to kind of plug what you're working on next and how folks can follow you and stay in touch basically with your next projects and your careers in general, as you know, two amazing artists in this moment.
Should I go first? So
Go for it, Julia.
I've got a couple projects that I'm working on right now. One of them is my senior thesis. I'm currently on a gap year, but I will be back next fall, hopefully, fingers crossed. And so my senior thesis is what I mentioned earlier. It's an adaptation of a Korean folk tale. And so I'm really excited. I've just started, writing some songs, writing some scenes, very early in the process still, but really excited about it. And I guess if anyone out there is interested in following my journey, I don't know, this sounds like I'm like an influencer. I just made an artist Instagram. So I now have a public artist Instagram. It's just my name. It's just Julia Riew. And then I also have a website, juliariew.com. It's the exact way my name is spelled, no spaces. And so those are that's my main project. But I've also got a couple other things. I'm working with an amazing illustrator on, we're trying to develop a storyboard animatic. So basically like those storyboarding videos you'll see in those like Frozen 2 documentary, you see the storyboard and you hear the song. So we're working on making one of those, hopefully highlighting some Asian artists. And then, I'm working on another musical, for Amos Musical Theater, which is an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland.
Very cool.
With my co-writer, who is incredible. So I'm really excited about those. Those are my most immediate projects right now.
Yes. And as you just heard, for those of you who don't know, Julia is still a student, hard as that is to believe. So you'll be finishing up at Harvard next year, right?
So awesome.
So cool.
I'm working on, I'm currently filming a puppet show with my company, Magic Forest, and we're trying to do somewhat what we did here, but with puppets. It's for young audiences, and the first one is called Tessa Takes a Turn. We laid down our tracks this week, and then I released an album with my bluegrass band in April, I can't remember. And so we're going to start working on a couple of music videos because we just hadn't been able to do that yet. And what else am I working on? I have a couple of writing projects that are due in the next month, an audio adaptation of a pre-existing work. And then also one of my pieces is getting published. So I'm excited about both those things coming up shortly. I think those are the big ones. You can follow me, Cuban Becky, on Instagram is usually where I post artistic projects.
Awesome. And we have time for one more, it looks like. And there's a question here about what were your favorite children's shows growing up? I think TV, theater, family show that you did with your siblings. What were those favorite works of art when you were the age of the audience of Jack and the Beanstalk?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I had the trifecta. I was very lucky, like I said, 90s kid. So The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast were the pinnacles. And then watching, I think I always loved musicals. So I watched the 90s or I think it was the 80s version of Annie over and over again. I had it on a tape. So that Annie and and Sound of Music. And then a kid, on TV, I think I loved Captain Planet. It goes back to the environment again. Really loved Captain Planet. But pretty much if it had music and songs, I was definitely watching it a lot of times.
Yeah. Same here with Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Mulan. Love Mulan.
Yeah.
My favorite movie ever is Tangled. I just watched it a week ago again, for the fourth time. I love that movie. And Avatar: The Last Airbender, my favorite TV show. I was watching a lot of Disney Channel too, Hannah Montana, or I was watching Drake and Josh, all those. But that was when I was a little older than Jack and the Beanstalk audience age. So definitely Disney. Disney is where I was and still am always.
Same.
Yeah.
Very fair.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that brings our time together to an end. Thank you all so much thank you both for joining and being our guests. Thank you to our audience for tuning in and listening. Jack and the Beanstalk will be available through January 4th. We are doing a few interactive meet and greet moments with our cast on the next 2 weekends, so look out for those. I think that's that. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, A.R.T.